Hello guys, welcome to this week's episode of Heavy Metal Tones, the last in a four-part mini-series of Black Sabbaths. This one is Conclusions, Delusions and Illusions. I'm going in with no notes today. I thought I would just wing it in my head. I've been thinking about it for the last few days. I was going to do sort of like an episode on cover versions, but after listening to a couple of atrocious ones and a couple of good ones, I really didn't want to be negative. So I'm not going to do that. So I thought I'd just chat about some things that have come across my mind after the weekend, how the weekend's been going, and my sort of brain went one direction. So I thought this is the way to do it. Now, I have to apologise a bit if I make a bit of old man noises. 1 second. Oh. I was at a gig on Saturday night at the Basement. It was 4 bands. It was a cover version band night thing, and it was Van Halen, Poison, Guns N' Roses, Iron Maiden. I couldn't get there till late-ish, so I missed out the first 2 cover bands, which didn't bother me too much. But I did see a really good band on the small stage called Endless Grin. They're a Punjabi, Hindi death metal band. Absolutely brilliant. They really rocked it. They did a great version of the Trooper, which was crazy. So that was nice. Caught up with some friends, Callum and Maggie and Laurie and things. It was written Wayne. It was really good. But I did headbang, as I always do, to Iron Maiden, quite violently, as my want, and I'm a bit sort of stiff and sore, and my throat's a bit raw. So if I go a bit croaky or I make old man noises, because I can't turn my head. Hang on. It is what it is. Even seasoned nutters like me, it can take your toll. 1 second. So, conclusions, delusions, and illusions. Right. So, I thought we'd talk about. I talk about this week about. The first part, we'll talk about what Sabbath. The conclusions for me is what Sabbath means and what it means to the world of music in general, not just heavy metal and rock and roll, but what it means to the music in general. Their influences, how they've influenced, and how bands are different now to where they were, to the way that say Sabbath was. So my conclusion really is that Sabbath will always be, whether you're a fan of them or not, and which I find unusual if you're not. It seems to me not quite normal, but we're all different. We all have this is the beauty of humanity. The thing about Sabbath is there is I interviewed Tony Doolin from Venom Inc. on name drop on just earlier in the week, and we were discussing about every band has its if it's a big band with a lot of history, when you listen to the band, unless you come in from the beginning with them, everyone has their moment, right? So Black Sabbath's I'm a Tony Martin Black Sabbath moment. I'm a Tony Doolin Venom moment, because you may have listened to them, you might have listened to the albums quite, like you might have gone on, like with me with Venom, I was given At War with Satan by a friend, and listened to that, it just blew my mind. But the first thing I did was then go, because this was around about 1991 when they released Primeval. I went and bought the latest Venom album, and that was the Tony Doolin Venom album, and so it sort of really, that's who then I attached to. Same with Sabbath. I'm a big Sabbath fan. I've listened to them since I was a young boy. But when I went to go and buy my album and go and see them with my money, it was Tony Martin, so it became my era. And I think what happens is that you get some really nasty people saying nasty things because about certain people, certain eras of their bands, because they're not being subjective, they're being reactive. And as I said with Mob Rules, I felt a little bit bad after the Mob Rules episode, to be honest with you, because I said, no, I'm not a negative person by nature, and I found to be sometimes with criticisms you've got to read, and the word criticism is there in the word, right? You've got to sort of criticize it. You can't always eulogize it, and so it was a bit. I felt uncomfortable slightly about it afterwards, but as I got the feedback, you say what you feel, and that's how I felt. But way back, so let's go back to where I started this conversation. So you've got a band as large as Sabbath in the pantheon of music. You're going to have eras, where your diehard fans are this era, that era, and it's usually around vocalists. Very rarely do people go, oh no, that's not the Cliff Burton era Metallica. I'm that because I'm sort of connected with Cliff Burton because he's a bass player and I really enjoy I think he was a genius. So, once he died, sadly, I think Metallica lost their way. Again, it's his personal taste, personal opinion. It's not. I don't want you running around shaking your fists at me. It's a personal opinion. It is what it is. But so it's usually around singer changes, and I think Sabbath. In conclusion, I think Sabbath is all things to everyone. Is what I'm trying to get to, which is a rare beast, isn't it? Because I will not listen to. Not listen to. That's too strong a word. I don't tend to listen to Steve Hogarth era Marillion albums. First two, same with apart from the first two, same with non-Gabriel Genesis. I like the two albums after Trick of a Tale and with Wind and Wuthering because they sort of sound like Gabriel a bit. And so, I tend not to go there, but it doesn't mean I wouldn't go there. I tend not to, but I wouldn't. But with Sabbath, you find that, you'll give everything. Most people give all Sabbath eras a go. Even Iron Maiden, and I said way back in some early episode, if you go back to one of the episodes, one of the first ones I did, we were talking about Maiden. I didn't do the Blaze Bayley albums because I was a snobbish idiot. And then I sort of got back to them, and they're actually really good albums. They really are. Aside from the fact that I'm not a fan of Blaze Bayley's Maiden era, he gave it a go. And that's the thing with Sabbath. It's all things to everyone. Okay, so you can dip in and go, I like the Dio era. But who doesn't like the Ozzy era? I might give the Martin go. Yeah, give Martin. I might give, all the other singers, not that there's been many, a go, right? And you sort of you're happy to bounce along. I don't know many bands that have that kind of hold over the fans and over the genre, and not just that, but if you there are, I mean, we'll talk about this in a little while, but there's a thing about musical growth. Not sadly, because we're lucky, but there are bands that are coming through now that I don't know where their musical growth is going to go. Like if you look at, and I did the episode, Where's the Blues Gone Man? If you look at, say, the core energy, if you want to use the right word, for Black Sabbath, is that they were a blues band. Because they would come through with the blues explosion of the 60s in the UK, and every single street had a blues club. Everyone was playing blues, and not to belittle the medium and the genre. I love the blues. Once you know the basic constraints, you can really write a song. It's very like punk. They're have very much synergy, punk and blues, because it's written by people who were uneducated or less educated in the music. It was all about feel and drive and passion, and I think and they're not constrained by the fact that I don't know what an augmented seventh or a suspended seventh or Mixolydian. They don't care. If that note sounds good to that next to that note, whether it's correct or not, it doesn't matter to them. It just sounds good to them. And I think this is why the blues is important. But that's another note. But so, they come from that. They were called Earth originally, and my friend saw them in a blues club in Birmingham called Earth. Lucky, so and so. And one second, my computer. See, chat. It goes into sleep mode. I never know how to get it out. Admin. Anyway, so they grow, right? So they're growing, and they go from a blues band to, like, almost overnight to a heavy rock band. And they don't like, Ozzy never liked the term heavy metal, so let's just say that they in their minds, they're heavy rock bands. We paint them as a heavy metal band, because they make fast and heavy music that isn't blues, that is a bit more away from the blues. So it's not a heavy rock band. I would never put them in the same category as, say, Deep Purple or Led Zeppelin or Badfinger. I just wouldn't. I think that early, maybe not even the first album. No, I just can't even do it. I think they just didn't. They changed completely as soon as the first album was released. But what I'm saying is, there's growth, right? So, and as they grow, as all things grow, we change, right? We don't stay 12 all the time, unless you're Cliff Richard. You don't stay 12 forever, right? So you tend to change, and this is the beauty of bands like Black Sabbath, because they come from the blues. Where do they go? Well, blues, because blues is the root of all. At the root, I believe, truly, it's at the root of all modern music. Jazz, then blues, then modern music. There's growth. You can build on it and move forward, and you change. I think the sad part of modern bands now that come out, because the genres are already so rigidly defined, that they come into it and there's nowhere to go, and when they do go, it becomes so unlistenable to an extent that and too esoteric, that you're not going to sell records. All right. Now, there's a classic example of this is that, Stiff Little Fingers, the punk band, one of my favorites. Now, they wanted to be a jazz band, right? They wanted to play jazz. Now, the thing about that is, and they were gifted enough to play jazz, but they couldn't play jazz because they wanted to A, sell lots of records, B, sleep with lots of women, and C, tour the world. And you're not going to do that by playing jazz. You're just not. So they, you find a way into the music, and their way in was the power and the aggression and the energy of punk. It's like film directors. Great film directors come in and start making horror movies first because it's easy, it's bang for your buck, and then you can be off and do what you want. And then you're in the industry. It doesn't always work. You look at Sam Raimi. He makes one of the greatest independent movies, in fact, one of the most successful independent movies of all time before Paranormal Activity, Evil Dead, and then he goes on to destroy Spider-Man. So what can you do? It doesn't always work, does it, right? It doesn't always work. And we look at Metallica. Metallica, genre-defining band. I saw them in the Milton Keynes Bowl. They were a genre-defining thrash act. Go on and make Lulu. So, you're going to have the rough with the smooth sometimes. Doesn't always work. What I'm trying to say back to Sabbath is that I think one of their main sorry guys, I'm rambling. If I'm rambling, I'm not using any notes. I'm going in without a parachute today, but it's just because I feel like trying the old school stuff, because I used to do this before. They grow, right? And because they grow, they change. And when they change, they create different sounds. When they create different sounds, the difference between Sabbath and Sam Raimi, is that at the core of Sabbath, and at the core of, say, Stiff Little Fingers, and at the core of all great bands that have grown, The Who is a good example, and moved forward. Jethro Tull's another good one. Grown and moved forward in genres, and even Genesis to some extent, is that you have one key musician that or two that drive and have that single focused drive, and we have Tony Iommi in this one. I mean, Geezer Butler, yes, but Geezer Butler, in and out a bit, not, I mean, I'm not saying he's not as focused, because I'm sure he absolutely is. Sorry, Geezer, if you're listening. If you are listening, nice one. But, musically, you've got Tony Iommi, because at his core, he's a blues man, right? And from that, from those, how do we say it from those open notes and spaces that blues gives you, he's made a tight, closed sound, heavy sound that's so uniquely them. It's so uniquely him, and it always will be, even if it's the Tony Martin era and you're not a fan, even if it's the, Ozzy or Dio, whoever. It doesn't matter, because at the core you've got Tony Iommi with his ridiculous library of riffs, because he's freed by the freedom of blues and jazz behind him, right? So that's the heritage that I think that they give to other bands, but I don't think that's happening now. I think, sadly, that we look at, that they're not as open. I don't get that feeling that you could get an album from, say, I don't know, I'm not even going to pick a band, just some band, right? And they release an album, you love it, and then because you love it and you sell so many records and you pack out stadiums, you don't want to change, because everyone, it's human nature to hate change and fear change, right? So it's the brave that change, it's the brave that grow, and I think that Black Sabbath, in that respect, while will always hold fans and not fans alike, unfans, whatever the right word is, detractors maybe, alike, is the respect is that they have grown. They do albums that are different, but you might shout, but Tony, they all sound the same. No, they don't. They really, really don't. There is no way that you would have said to anyone listening to their very first album, hey, you're going to make Mob Rules. Hey, you're going to make Dehumanizer. Hey, you're going to make Tear, Hitler's Cross, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. They are so different, each album to each album. Yes, a lot of it is due to the amount of nose candy that they were enjoying, but that's just part and parcel of it. I mean, most musicians or most creatives will use some kind of altering mechanism. I'm going to say it nicely because I don't want to sound like I condone it, but they will use some kind of altering mechanism, whether it's an illicit drug, whether it's a bottle of Jack Daniels, whether it's a good, something, a mushroom, I don't know. Well, they're going to do something that helps them open and free their mind a bit more. It just happens that they get addicted to it, and then it can either destroy them or destroy the music. And this is the fine line that we play, right, between madness and sanity. Sorry, let's get my tea. Oh man, I'm so sore. A good sore, but sore. Anyway, that's my rambling. I think that that we sort of have to say thank you, Sabbath, thank you for the music. I was going to do an ABBA quote then. Oh dear. And just be thankful for whatever era is your Sabbath era. Whichever one you tune into, you might like all of them. You might you might only like only one of them. But you just got to say thank you, because truly, without them releasing that, groundbreaking album all those years ago, I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you now. I might be here, but I might be talking about, I don't know, prog still, or jazz or something, or punk, whatever. Although I love talking about punk and I love prog, but jazz is something that I'm not sure about. Truly, on a side note, if anyone has any recommendations, I really want to understand it. I really want to listen to it. I don't want to be closed-minded. I just don't. I can't connect with it. And it's not because it's not fast and heavy, because that's, me. I can listen to I listen to everything and anything, but I just find it a little bit exclusive and not inclusive. It's like when you go around mates and they say an in-joke and you don't know what the joke's about, but everyone's having a good laugh, and you feel, on the sideline looking in going, well, I should be laughing, but if I laugh, it'll be fake. And that's the same way I feel about jazz. It's like, you should be listening. I don't want to say, hey, I listen to this, and this, and Ella Fitzgerald, and you go, yeah, great, and you don't understand it. And I don't want to say, hey, I don't understand. It's like back to like Metallica and Lulu and St. Anger and the Black Album, those albums and Def Magnetic and all that stuff. I want to like it. I want to understand where they were coming from, but I don't at the same time. And sometimes I get a little bit snobbish about it and go, yeah, that's an anger. Everyone hates that. But there are people out there who would have think that's God's gift to music. I got when I bought the CD, I brought it home. I put it on. I remember it was in the corner. We were painting the lounge room at the time, and my daughter was probably about 14, 15 maybe, and she asked me about it, and I remember my wife said, oh, that's heavy metal, mate, love, it's Metallica, and I just went, no, it's not, and I took out the CD player after like literally one playthrough, and I chucked it in the bin. I'm not proud of that moment, but I did once give back to an ex-girlfriend. She gave me a Guns N' Roses cassette. I think it was Spaghetti. It may be Spaghetti, one of the albums. And she was working in a local checkout as a checkout girl in one of the local Waitrose. It was in Brent Cross. And I walked back round and I gave it back to her while she was at work. I put it onto a conveyor belt, and I remember watching it slowly move towards her, and I went, nah, not for me. Surprise, surprise, the relationship lasted no longer than a day after that. The ritual humiliation that I did there, what a plonker. At the time, I was just being honest. But now I think I should have said, thanks, love, and put it in the cupboard and never played it again. But I was just trying to be, I didn't know. Anyway, sidetrack. Coming to the end of this side, we're going to sort of come into the other side, and we'll just have a chat about each era's pluses and minuses, and where do you think it all goes from there. Anyway, thanks for listening to side A, part A, or part 1, whatever you like to look at it. Enjoy some ads wherever you are, some commercialism. I will go and warm my tea up, and I'll see you on the other side, guys. Bye for now.
Have you ever Googled your own name? Prepare for a shock, because your personal info, including addresses and phone numbers, is all out there. It's all harvested by data brokers and sold legally. Aura is a personal digital security service that scans the internet for your sensitive information and provides a full suite of privacy-enhancing tools. For a limited time, Aura is offering listeners a 14-day free trial at aura.com/safety. That's AURA.com/safety to learn more and activate the 14-day trial period.
Welcome back to part 2, side B or whatever. Hope you enjoyed the ads. I've got my fresh tea. You lubricate the old vocal cords. So in part 1 we talked about, well, we sort of rambled, winning with no notes. I knew what was in my mind, about sort of the history of what Sabbath was and how we feel about it, and how I feel about it and how we should think about it, and its influences. I don't think there is a heavy metal or heavy rock band on this planet playing right now who doesn't have an influence by the mighty Black Sabbath. I really don't. Yes, some of the newer bands will... Now, here's interesting, right? Here's how I look at this. Say there's a young bunch of Swedish men and women, boys and girls, whatever, starting a band up, and they've only listened to Deicide or I don't know, Iron Maiden or Judas Priest, or I suppose just some more extreme stuff. Behemoth, for instance, which I just got the new Behemoth album, by the way, signed from the band. Beautiful product. I mean, they do beautiful product. Great album as well. They're playing their music because they go, I'm playing it because I'm so influenced by such and such, say in the extreme bands. What they don't realise, I think, is that they're playing music by bands that were influenced by Sabbath. So indirectly, they are playing music and they are being influenced by them. I know that sounds like a sort of obvious thing to say, but it's quite interesting when you think about it, isn't it? Because I've been there. I'd play in bands, and we were like, no, we're a hardcore punk band, and we're not influenced by any of that rock and roll rubbish. And of course we are, because we're doing guitar pieces music that sounds like Chuck Berry. All right, because we're Pistols fans, but Steve Jones played Chuck Berry riffs because they're easy to play and infectious and the heart rock and roll. And so, when people are like, oh no, I'm only playing atonal, down-tuned, drone, sludge, doom, whatever subgenre they want to talk about, right at the core of their DNA is Black Sabbath. And right at the core of DNA of Black Sabbath is jazz and blues. So, it always, and as I mentioned before, I think a lot of classical influences in and around the Black Sabbath milieu. Milieu, it's a good word, isn't it? Rolls off the tongue a bit. It's... So, what I'm trying to say is that, even so, if you're one of those bands, you're like, oh no, I'm only playing drop C and palm muting drone stuff. I don't have anything to do with Black Sabbath. Yeah, you do, really. You do, because you wouldn't be picking that guitar up and playing that esoteric nonsense. Sorry, I'm just being a little bit. If you love that stuff, you love that stuff. Because of Sabbath. And a lot of us are extremely big Iron Maiden fans, and without Sabbath, no Iron Maiden, okay? Because the Nwaba movement, or new wave of British heavy metal, really heavily influenced by the heavy rock scene of the late 70s, mid to late 70s. So your Deep Purples, your Black Sabbaths, even though I said they weren't heavy rock, they were still in that genre, because heavy metal didn't really exist. Your Steppenwolfs, your Badfingers, your Free, those sort of like blue denim flared tight shirts, big hair, heaviness that the British do so well and did so well. No other country on earth could do it like them. I mean, obviously people do it well now, but back then, your Zeppelins, it was just like, at that time was cold. And your Thin Lizzies, I'm forgetting. I shouldn't forget the Thin Lizzies, right? So the conclusion is that when people say they're not influenced by them now, they are. I just would like to see I'd like to feel that we are going to sit here. All right, noise with the table. We're going to sit here in another 10 years' time, if I'm still doing this thing, and look at bands and go, wow, look how they've evolved. Look at the evolution of this band. You know, they may be playing country music now, God forbid, but they've evolved. That's what they wanted to do, and they're chasing their passions, not the almighty dollar. I know that sounds sort of romantic, that people just do it for the music, but I think they generally do. When I talked to Tony the other day, the sense I got from him was that by no means, you know, are they stadium headliners, but they are full of the passion for music, and he is so full of the passion for love of music, and he's a massive Sabbath fan. And speaking of, when I said I couldn't say good things about Sabbath cover bands, I have to say, if you can find it, I don't believe it's on Spotify. I couldn't find it on Spotify the other day. I've got my copy on vinyl. But Tony and Jeff from Venom Inc., Mantis, they decided to help get, during the height of COVID in Italy, when all those Italians were, you know, dying so badly. Tony has a lot of friends and does a lot in Italy, and he decided that he wanted to help out, and so he made a charitable record where all the proceeds went to the COVID recovery in Italy, the victims. He did a Black Sabbath cover album called Sabatonero, with some brilliant covers in there with some great people. There's people from Nervosa who then became Crypta. They were just, I mean, I can't even begin to tell you how amazing this album is. It's not easy to obtain. It was limited in its run, but it's such a brilliant album. It's a shame it's not on streaming services easily to get, because I reckon it was probably the best Black Sabbath cover album there is. That's as far as I'm going with covers and talking about covers, okay? But that's why I just wanted to go back. I just wanted to draw it back to say Tony, talking about his influences. I mean, there's a man, he's in a band. He was originally Atomcraft, which was a New Album band. You know, he was in Venom, which was they were the inventors of in my opinion, thrash and black extreme metal. So amazing pioneers of the subgenres. Yet, you know, an extreme. I mean, Tony can be extreme. He's a very extreme character, but at the same time, he'll happy to sit back and mellow to some, you know, Aussie Sabbath. And then, to be honest, it can be quite mellow in some respects, in some parts. But as I said, let's talk about era by era. So, the Aussie era. What can I say about that? Even though Tony Martin is my era, I'd say Ozzy is my next, because firstly, his voice is wonderful. It is untrained, like John Lydon, like Johnny Rotten. It's like lightning in a bottle. It's mercurial. It's a moment that shouldn't be but is. You know, a dirty, raggy-assed boy from Birmingham, from Aston. You know, a post-war child. And look what he's made. You know, went on to be one of, like, you know, what do they call it? I mean, like, people call him, you know, Dark Lord and all this sort of stuff. He's so far removed from that image that it's possible to be. He's a nice, gentle-souled, musical man, and he's done some amazing. And so the Aussie era albums, they were pioneering. They made some awful stuff. Let's be honest. They had some fillers, not all killers, but they made stuff that was anthemaic, and they made stuff that made you think and move. War Pigs, Paranoid, Hole in the Sky, Symptom of the Universe, you know, stuff that just, NIB, Supernaut, stuff that just brings you up in a swell of energy and crashes you down, and it's almost like a sugar rush with them, right? And behind it is naively recorded, I think, in a lot of those first few albums, this backing sound, this sound that's like a truck crashing through a wall. It wasn't until later on that they I think they engineered better and managed to get the most out of it. You have Bill Ward's splashy drums, open-armed, open-shouldered. You got the, criminally underestimate, even though he's still considered one of the best bass players of all time in Geezer. Writes a great song. Doesn't just sit on the octave below. He writes, his bass pieces are fluid and you can see where Steve Harris gets it from when it comes to him. And then of course you got Tony and Ozzy. It's a partnership made in heaven or hell, which way you look at it. And then of course excess happens, success happens, and egos happen, and things fall apart. It's very common. And then in comes Dio, and Dio, for people, I don't know anyone who doesn't like Dio. I'm not a Dio fan he's as such, apart from Heaven and Hell, which is a solid gold classic. I much prefer his solo work, Rainbow and so on. God rest his soul. But, he come in and his ego and his Americanisms, without being rude to Americans, but, he sort of tries to be a little bit too, change something that's already working. He just needed to slot in and be honest, but no, he slots in and wants to put his mark on it, and I get it, I really do. So Dio has its Heaven and Hell. I think if he hadn't made Heaven and Hell and just went straight into Mob Rules, people wouldn't talk about him in the same breath as they do. It's because he just happened to hit that zeitgeist at the right moment. And then of course he goes, and you have a plethora of different people. I really haven't talked about those. 1 second, put my tea down. I really haven't talked about that era of the sort of I call it the Sabbath dark ages, right? It's that moment where nothing was quite sure what was happening. No, 1 second, my computer, one moment. This is why you're dialing, guys, isn't it? Hear me tapping on a computer. Yeah, so there was a few albums there, let's be honest, that I don't think most of us revisit. I'm going to name them in a second. There we go. I think Born Again is one of them. When was the last time you played Born Again by Black Sabbath? With Ian Gillan. It should be, on paper, it should be orgasmic, shouldn't it? Ian Gillan, what a set of pipes. With Geezer Butler and Bill Ward, mate, you'd be thinking, oh my God. But it just is, I don't know. It sort of flops, doesn't it? None of the songs, none of them, not one of them I could really name along or sing along to. And again, sorry, Ian Gillan Sabbath might be your era, but nah, not for me. And then we go into the Tony Martin era, of course, excluding Seven Star. Eternal Idol, Headless Cross, and Tear. And then, comes back. That's Amazing. We talked about the last week, and that's my favourite era. And then we get Dehumanizer. I don't know what you feel about Dehumanizer. again, I don't want to be negative. But the top song on that for me is Time Machine. That's it. It's that. But then again, look at the year it was released. I mean, when I'm looking at the year it was released in 1992. So 92, I remember mid to early 90s very, very well. It was the heavy metal wilderness, wasn't it? You know, that awful bloody grunge had taken over. There was, in England, there was a revisit to punk, which is an amazing thing, which I loved. And then there was also your, the rise and fall of R&B, rise of R&B and digital, faceless pop music. It's your Stockachen and Waterman era, Kylie Minogue, all that sort of stuff. It went from a time when you gave a Deep Purple single at number 2 to your top 10 completely filled with, actors from Neighbours and Home and Away and EastEnders and so on. This is for those in America. The rest, well, they're Australian and British soap operas, very popular in England, making singles and milking their personality, the cult of personality, as much as they could. So it was a bit, and also that it was a bit of the wilderness years for me. So you had that era, and then after that, Ozzy comes back. Oh no, sorry, I apologise. Tony comes back. Tony decides to come back with Cross Purposes, which is a brilliant album. I really, really like it. It's sort of the forgotten Tony Martin era, and I think it's because it's hard to get hold of now, physical copies of it. Cross of Thorns is brilliant. Dying for Love is great. The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, brilliant. Cardinal Sin, great. The highlight for me is Evil Eye, the last track on the album. It's very typically Tony Martin. So there was that wilderness era, and then we come and then we go back. Of course, we have Forbidden in 1995, another IRS label album. It's the reason why you can't get it, with Tony Martin. And actually, interestingly enough, The Illusion of Power was written by Ice-T. What a freaky world, hey. Crazy. That was he wrote with Tony Martin and Ice-T. Now there's an experience for people, and he even just said on an interview I did with him, how meeting Ice-T was a crazy, crazy time. So, we get to that, and then we go back, and then obviously from there on, Ozzy comes back. So there's that wilderness era period. Taking away the weirdness of the, Born Again, the up and down of Tony Martin and Dio, and also that awful album Seventh Star. No, I shouldn't say awful. It's not really a Sabbath album. It was like Tony Iommi album that they labelled as Sabbath. It's not awful. It's just not my thing. As the eras go, they all have their pluses and they all have their downs, right? The Tony Martin era issue is for me is not the music. For me, the Tony Martin era is really crackingly good because you've got Jeff Nichols on keys and it's more textured. It's the fact that it was poorly promoted. It was at the wrong time. If Tony Martin came in to the band and say, I don't know, 82, you would, before Dio, for instance, you would all talk about him in the same breath as you talk about Dio. You just would. I think it's because it was that wilderness period where most Sabbath fans had walked away because Dio had gone or Ozzy had gone and were being snobbish about it, and all they were doing was buying and listening to back catalogue. You had labels that didn't care for the music, just wanted to have a big band on their label, and thought that the cachet of having Black Sabbath on your label would sell multiple millions of records. That isn't the case. There, a mixture of poor decisions when it comes to producers, didn't help. Infighting within the band, bad blood. It wasn't until they all come back together again, and of course I don't even really enjoy the later, when Ozzy came back. I thought 13, even though it's their last album and it should be a great way out, I didn't really connect to it. I don't. It's a good album. I just think it hasn't got the depth to it. It feels quite thin and a bit too Zakk Wylde. I don't know if you understand what I mean by that. Just a little bit too, let's make metallic. The beauty of the early Sabbath albums is they were heavy because they were heavy. They were thickly chorded. They were mixed and splashy and dense and rhythmic. Whereas I think now there's sort of this tendency to layer it so heavily and make it metallic in the mix, or make it metallic. I don't know how to describe it. They're not. It doesn't feel. It's like real Coke and fake Coke, right? You know the difference. You know why one works and why one doesn't, right? The reason that Coke works is it's fucking full of sugar, and the reason that Coke Light or Zero doesn't work is because it doesn't have sugar in it. It's full of preservatives, which are trying to be sugar. If I think about that analogy. So that's why I think early Sabbath is going to always outweigh later Sabbath, because new Sabbath is sugar light, sugar free, right? In its mix. Now I did say right at the beginning, this is conclusions, delusions, and illusions. Now, my conclusion is that Sabbath will always be the greatest band in the history of heavy rock. For me, I am a die-Lord Iron Maiden fan. Fucking love Iron Maiden. I wouldn't travel an hour across the town to go headbanging to a cover band if I didn't love Maiden. I love Maiden. I also wouldn't have a big tattoo on my back of Eddie if I didn't either, right? But Sabbath will always be the number one. Okay, so that's the conclusion. They will always be the greatest. Whatever they do, whatever influence you think you're not being influenced by them, by osmosis you are being influenced. Okay, by cultural osmosis you are being influenced by them. If you play heavy metal or heavy rock, and delusion. I think the delusion part really of this conversation is that we're all deluded if we think that one aspect of the history of the band is better than the other, because we should enjoy them all equally. And what I've learned from this 4-part series, and I hope you've learned this as well, is to sort of enjoy every aspect of the band, right? Every part of their history. Sorry, I'm going to get my tea. And the illusion, I think in the illusion part is the magic and smoke and mirrors that a band can do, like Sabbath, come out of it with playing blues and ending up making and creating a genre that is so vastly diverse, so infinitely more diverse than its birthplace. When you listen to blues, there are different types of blues. Yes, there are Texas blues, bluegrass blues. They're all different kinds of blues. White blues, Delta blues, but only a handful. Within that handful of blues is a handful of a basic one-dimensional style. Now, I didn't mean it that way, because Rory Gallagher and people like that are not one-dimensional. Gary Moore, no, I don't mean that. Buddy Guy, Albert King. I could do a whole episode on blues guitarists, right? Which I might do one day. Not that, but it is a simply structured piece of type of music. As my dear brother would say, it's like status quo. It's like another song, another song. It's what makes it so joyous is that repetitivity. Is that the right word? Is that a real word? The repetition of it. If repetitivity isn't a real word, I'm going to now license it. But with the diversity of metal that the family, the music we listen to, the reason you're listening to my show when we're chatting about it, is that we all have these, whether you sit there and go, I only listen to new album, no you don't, because you would listen to speed metal, thrash metal. I can't even name. Each genre has an infinite different amount of genres, because people within the beauty and joyousness within the heavy metal world is that there's so much to dig out and find and learn. Whether it's noiseless rubbish, whether it's someone's, like I said a few weeks ago, it's like someone standing in a room howling while rain is playing, but and someone's got one string and they're playing one note in an atonal dirge. It doesn't matter to that person and to their little group of fans. That's their stairway to heaven. It's their, I know, I like in your wardrobe. It's their, it's their rock and roll all night. It's their thing, right? It's their number of the beast. And so that the illusion is, we're all illusion. The illusion is that we think we're not being influenced, and we are. That's the illusion. So, conclusion, yes. So that's it. Conclusion, illusion. And delusion. No, we're not deluded. Although I probably am sometimes. Anyway, that's it for this week. Let's put my tea down 1 second. I hope you enjoyed the little 4-part mini-series within the Heavy Metal Tones framework. I really enjoyed doing it. It made me think about it. It was really good to think about the stuff again. It really does open the mind and make you go back and be retrospective. Next week's episode was going to be the Head to the Dead album, but because the new Venom Inc. album drops this Friday, I am going to be doing a deep dive into the new Venom Inc. album. I'm so looking forward to it. I've deliberately only heard the couple of the singles. Even though I've had access to the album, I haven't listened to it because I really want to just do it on day of release. Old school. I can't wait for my vinyl copies to come in. I've ordered about 4 different variants of it. And cassette, I think. And I haven't done CD because I don't know. I might do it. Who knows? Anyway, that's me for this week. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope that you have opened your mind and gone and listened to it, some different eras of Sabbath, and not just going, I'm only Ozzy, I'm only Dio. I hope you have listened to Tony Martin, because I'd like to say that, it's my era. And see how you feel about it, and how the different eras that we live through have changed the way the music is made, because there are points which I didn't really come across actually, that each era is different as well, because they're making music sometimes subconsciously, recording subconsciously differently for them to sell their records. It's very difficult to be 100% true to your one sound, because otherwise you will fade away and die, because you do need to grow, and this is part of this conversation I had today, is growth is the key behind it. Anyway, keep safe guys, and we'll chat next week. Bye now.